Hey everyone, it's Justin,
Hello, and Eric.
and we're Sonic Bloom Live, a weekly episodic live cast news program podcast. I don't know what you'd actually call it, to be honest.
Video chat. Yeah,
Video chat. And my mouse is right over my
yeah.
face right now, so I'm seeing that on the video. Yeah, either way,
Excellent.
we're a news program that covers video game news and video game topics. Most of which like relate to the game industry and how the game industry is progressing over these years, especially in this time frame where things are so much more turbulent and changing in ways that are kind of unpredictable. Um, Not least of which for like external factors, but also just the way the game industry is kind of reinventing itself this generation, and if not in the next, generation, I guess. But we take topics every month or every week, and we take about three of them and go over the content of those and try to give some insight to them. So if you like this sort of thing, we broadcast every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on youtube.com/SonicBloomTV. If you actually like this type of content, like and subscribe because it does help us figure out who is actually listening to this stuff. Um, Not just the live numbers and the live views that I get to look at the beginning of every broadcast. But for this week, Eric,
hmm
what are we going over?
For this week, we are going to be discussing drama at Ubisoft. And we're going to do these real light. Drama at Ubisoft related to prior harassment allegations. Um, we're going to talk a bit about, do a little bit of our own recap of the Nintendo Direct and Sony State of Play videos that they showed off on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to cover sort of messaging from Unity. They have indicated that they want to sort of refocus their messaging on developers, specifically game developers. And we're going to cover why that is, what's been going on, and what it looks like they may be trying to do.
Yeah, and how successful they are at doing it, for that matter.
Yeah,
Because
we'll
they've
see.
kind of had some like whiffs at that.
Yes.
All right. So for the first topic, let's go over that. Do you want me to recap, Eric?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. Ubisoft, this kind of flailing developer as of late, who we've also covered quite extensively over the past like month or so, um, has new reports about the harassment allegations that kind of plagued the company in the 2019s, 2020s, when it was becoming very known that these creative heads of studios were creating these sort of um, abusive or harassing environments that became pretty toxic for a lot of people working there. It wasn't just one studio, but it was a handful of them. But the most of the allegations focus around like the Assassin's Creed's like every other game studio, Ubisoft Montreal. They kind of trade off with I think it's the French studio that handles the other ones. Um, but they alternate, kind of like the Call of Duty franchise alternate between developers. So Ubisoft Montreal is one of those studios that had a lot of allegations leveled at it over the past couple of years. The director in question is Jonathan Dumont, creative director for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and he's also lead on Assassin's Creed Project Red, which I believe is the Japanese-based
Japan
Assassin's
based.
Creed game. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like likely going
Feudal
to be.
Japan.
I'm not even sure what time period it's in. They did not. They probably so rewind. Last Saturday, actually during Disney's D Plus thing, Assassin's or Ubisoft had their Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft like blowout thing, and that's where they sort of showed what the future of Assassin's Creed was going to be. Interesting if you're interested in Assassin's Creed. The series has periodically gone through these stale periods. Like they had that with I think Assassin's Creed 1 through 2 in the trilogy that was followed by 2 was when they were like really doing their best. And then the following one, Assassin's Creed, well, and I guess Black Flag, because a lot of people like the Black Flag a lot. But then 3 was released, which was on this brand new engine, or not necessarily on a new engine, but it was had some new tech in it, and it was not nearly as well appreciated. And then they did Unity, which was on a brand new engine, which also wasn't particularly appreciated. But then there was a 2 more after that, which were like mixed bag reception. That was I can't remember that. Liberation? No, that was the 3rd one.
I thought wasn't Liberation one of the ones that was a handheld? It was like PSP.
Maybe it was the one that took place in like Jack the Ripper, London, like mid 1800s era, I believe.
That I believe was Liberation.
That's not a handheld. That's a console release then.
I'm trying to see if I can come up with the list.
It also had steampunk stuff in it.
Maybe Syndicate.
Syndicate, yeah, that was it.
So yeah, it went Black Flag, Rogue, Unity, Syndicate, Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla.
Right.
Liberation was, I believe, one of the sort of side ones.
Yeah, that I think probably complemented Assassin's Creed 3, or Assassin's Creed 3 had the subtitle Liberation.
Oh no, it was Assassin's Creed 3. Liberation was a spin-off of Assassin's Creed 3.
That I think you played as a different character other than I can't remember his name.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Either way, we got wind of that. The rest of their products, Origins and Odyssey, were actually really well received and kind of a reinvention, make it much more of an RPG open world thing. And then they at this they kind of are trying to take it back to basics. They're bringing the next Assassin's Creed is going to be taking place in Baghdad, like before it was probably under Iraq. And like it's going back to the Middle East. It's being a much smaller game, much tighter game that doesn't have the sprawling RPG elements to it, but more focusing on the assassinations and whatnot. And Project Red was announced as well, along with another game that one takes place in Japan, another one that's a mobile game takes place in China. The Red, I believe, is the Japan one that's like feudal era. It's very similar to Ghost of Tsushima in a lot of ways, but that's what they're working on. Reports to Game Developers magazine, or whatever it's called, had caught wind of people avoiding that team because Jonathan Dumont, which was one of the people who've been alleged as targeting women, throwing out homophobic slurs, intimidating people, slamming on doors, that sort of thing. He's
punching walls.
Yeah. He's seen some amount of action, and Ubisoft has taken action on this. They had supposedly like a 5-year plan to kind of clean up the studios. But a lot of people got pushed out or fired. Jonathan Dumont, being a creative head, has not been, but he's supposedly gotten better. But either way, the legacy remains where people know of his antics and do not want to work with him or on his team. And I imagine this goes all the way down to hiring as well. Like people who may be looking for a new job, working within the game industry, or moving more particularly from one studio to another, may be less interested in working for Ubisoft, especially for teams where they know there was abuse and a toxic work environment prior to that. Yeah. So that's sort of what's going on there. There's not much more to it. It's all allegations. We know some of the allegations towards Ubisoft were true because people were getting fired left and right at Ubisoft, and they're trying to clean it up. People who've been named, some of them are still there, and clearly by people not wanting to work on the team, at least allegedly. This may lead to more credence that the team that he was running did have issues with it. Eric. Mm-hmm. So this is a constant theme in the game industry that we've talked about with Activision and other studios that have run into this. EA historically, it goes on and on. What is the kind of fallout that you think will happen if Ubisoft fails to actually address the internal toxicity issues?
Yeah, it's a sort of a tough problem that they're faced with there. You know, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head with the statement about future team members making it difficult for um, uh, sort of two classes of people to join and stay with Ubisoft, and that is people who already know that they're applying for the team that um, Jonathan is a part of, or those who arrive and then find out about it right after. Maybe they didn't know, like they're hired for a position, it didn't come up in the interviews. They get in on day one. Within the first 2 weeks, they meet this person and they realize, oh wait, and that you're this type of thing. Like and some people, a lot of our friends in the industry are of a mindset where there's just like no tolerance for that. Like they're not going to put up with, you know, like I can't say this about everybody, of course, but the people that we tend to work with and know in the industry are very against that type of thing. And I know myself, I would have a hard time working on a team. Would probably just resign from the team if that were an element there. There is something to be said for people working on their problems, and I do think that people can work stuff out, but not if they're not in the same position with the same stresses.
Right.
Like you have to have time and give space to have someone actually work on themselves for that. And we don't know on the outside what Jonathan Dumont has worked on, what Ubisoft has enabled. There really wasn't any talk about. I imagine that if there was a space where Jonathan Dumont could take some time off and like go take classes on anger management and or the other things that people who are alleged as alleged harassers like have to do, or they take courses on how to be a reasonable person at a company, right? Like
right.
There was no language about that in any of the news that we were able to dig up on this, in any of the reporting. Which makes it seem like he's sort of been in this constant position without any verbal addressing, as far as we're aware. I mean, I haven't seen a statement, I haven't seen anything, and it may be one of those things where like just don't say anything, it'll be worse when you say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's suspicious is that he's in the same position, or at least it seems he's in the same position. And for someone to, like as you said, for someone to actually address their problems, keeping them in the same position with the same sort of stressors is not a way to improve, especially for the people who work underneath them and may have been a victim to his.
Oh God, yes.
Right, like you are keeping people who want to work for a company in a position where it makes it very difficult for them to say, yeah, I want to continue to work with this person that, made the life and work culture difficult.
Right. And the worst part is that when you are harassed at work, generally your work suffers for that.
Yeah.
So like they're not even getting the best effort out of their employees. They're like employees are working under duress effectively there. In theory, there may be those that have great working relationships with Jonathan Dumont because they weren't targeted or they weren't part of certain meetings where walls were being smashed or, whatever. It's we're on the outside. We don't know the specifics, but I imagine that it sounds like this very thing is happening. They're losing people and staff simply by virtue of having this person who has not apparently had some time away or to work on it still there.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, not to say that Ubisoft's current performance is an indication of the health of their teams, but the allegations became known in the 2019, 2020. I think most prominently 2020 during COVID.
Yeah.
And we've seen not a lot out of Ubisoft. They've had to cancel multiple games. They had to cancel their I think it was Rainbow Six Siege game, which was like the one that is very strange and that has like aliens taking over the world. It was about the pandemic, but then it happened during the pandemic. So they're like, well, that's not a good idea. So they had to like scrap that game. But like Watch Dogs 2 did not perform as well as they probably were hoping. And then Assassin's Creed's people's interest in Assassin's Creed has been kind of waning as well. And they like for a game that's as perennial as Assassin's Creed, they really need to have a creative team, a good creative team with people who are collaborating, working together, reinventing what Assassin's Creed games mean, because the formula, milking it over and over again and just doing a new location is not really going to cut it. Especially when you get games like, Ghost of Tsushima that shows you what a game, like a period game that focuses around the action of one character, could be if if the Assassin's Creed games were reinventing themselves. And instead we've had like 3 or 4 games now of the same like lineage, where you had Odyssey, Origins, and I don't remember the name of the Viking one.
Valhalla.
Valhalla. Yeah. And it's unclear whether or not Project Red is taking significant steps forward, because we've seen very little of it. The only thing we really know is that the game that's being developed by the French team is a return to form for the Assassin's Creed franchise.
Yeah, they've only shown a teaser, which doesn't show any gameplay or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, so, part of this is that apparently shortly after the original... shortly after the original news broke in 2020, by the way, this is a couple years old now, about the harassment allegations.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to Liberation, which is a publication, a news publication for the game industry, I believe, or at least that covers the game industry in part. The head of HR for Ubisoft, apparently, according to them in their article, apparently said that Yves Guillemot, who is the CEO or head, president, the owner of Ubisoft, Yves is okay with a toxic management as long as these managers' results exceed their toxicity level.
Which is horrible.
It's awful. Yeah. To give you a sense of, apparently their operating orders or their marching orders is like taskmaster as hard as you need to, but just get the results, which is not. You can see where if the head of HR made that claim, if they truly did it, then you could see how it would be difficult to continue working at.
Yves Guillemot is the CEO of Ubisoft. So if it's coming from the very top and coming all the way down, it's not promising what it means for Ubisoft as a studio and what they're actually able to do. Even the initiative that they had, they have a special name for it, but the initiative to try to fix things was really more about letting French Canadian or French white guys run studios, not necessarily entirely white, but not giving the same opportunities to people who are coming from outside of the space, people who would be coming from outside the regions in which they operate, and making sure they have some more racial diversity in the ranks.
And including giving, addressing the issue of pay equity, which apparently is an ongoing thing. That project's name is Project Rise.
Rise,
and it's a Ubisoft internal thing, but apparently they've made it. Yeah, right.
They made it sound like a game, but it's not.
Code name Rise.
I think the thing that kind of that I have an issue with more than anything else is that throughout the game industry you have this kind of acceptance of your creators or your creatives, the ones that run companies, being allowed to be as abusive as possible, or as much as they need to in order to get the vision completed. And there's this idea that one visionary can run everything. In the size of games today, that's fundamentally not true. You need to have a lead designer, and you need to have someone that has a vision for what the game can be to help lead it, and be in charge of the person that manages what that vision is. But having that person be the authoritarian that drives everything has repeatedly over and over again returned somewhat good results in a game, but have gutted the teams every single time. So whatever creative force there was that was creating it is gone by the time the game's completed, because everybody, once they saw it through, is I'm done with this. I can't do it. So, you know, if S comes from old school game development where that was acceptable, I think he was like one of the original developers of some like the early Ubisoft games. Um, they've given people like Mikel Ancel, who's did like Beyond Good and Evil and Rayman, like sort of those creative authorities. Um, so I'm not sure how valid his opinion is, even if he is running a multi-billion-dollar game studio. At least in that respects to how like the actual nitty gritty of game development actually happens, because I don't think he's been in a position of actually making games probably for some time. So, either way, if you work on a game, actually, I was going to say make another point. What's happening at Ubisoft, and this is actually the case, is what ends up happening is the people who have been in the game industry and have enough titles under their belt can usually move to another studio without too much of an issue, and so there's an amount of I like amount of like what am I trying to say there's an amount of privilege there that allows people who've been in the industry for some time. And what ends up happening is people who are abusive like that, people want to work on the games that who are outside from the game industry. They'll come in and they'll be the receiving end of that abuse under people like that, because people who have enough years in the game industry can move on and be like, I'm not tolerating this, and we'll find better teams. But it's like new people who come in who are like green and want to be part of the game industry are getting abused left and right under producer or like directors, producers, designers like this, and it's not even fair to the people who like are striving to be part of the industry. And I think it's a pretty disgusting way of running game studios, no matter how much of a creative savant you are. It's just I just don't think it's something we should tolerate in the game industry, and we should call it out whenever we see it.
Yeah, you may see that there's a thread. If you watch us over the weeks, there's a thread of sort of topics that we tend to pick up on and report. And this type of harassment, sexual harassment, physical harassment, mental harassment, are things that we will try our best to raise awareness of, because we see them as serious problems that are effectively a plague for the industry. It hurts our coworkers and it hurts our industry, and we should not tolerate it.
People to abandon the industry, good people abandoning the industry, all that sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Foster creativity in this industry. Don't like brutalize people
for the sake of one person's creativity.
Yeah, or personal desires for that matter.
Right.
Like,
and we've been part of some of it, or worked with people who've very much been part of it. Like
seen different
the war stories coming out of like BioShock.
Oh yeah. Friends through BioShock. Yeah, I mean personal stories as well. Like having dealt with being put down in terms of like just constant negativity and crazy work, crunch. That's that type of thing at all. We've been there.
Yeah.
Luckily, I will say for me, I've luckily never had like sexual harassment, physical harassment, or there's a whole slew of these things. I don't really want to talk about this right now, but there are certain aspects where Justin and I are coming from a place of having had experiences and seen it and tried to do our best. And I think at this point it's especially now that we have more seniority in the industry, we've been around for a while.
Yeah.
Speak up louder, because we have that privilege.
And we're not like struggling, but it's the sort of thing where we speak up about it. You're like, I'm not sure if Ubisoft would ever hire me in the future, but if they caught wind of these things. Anyways, well, let's move on to the next topic, because I think we could beat a dead horse here quite extensively, given how much of a history there is in the game industry. But let's go to something more positive, depending on your standpoint or what you were expecting from these. But the recap of Nintendo and Sony's like direct marketing events. Nintendo Direct, Sony's is PlayStation State of Play. both were scheduled for this past Tuesday, where they did show off some stuff. But Eric, you want to recap what happened, or do you want me to?
You mean so? I mean, both of these companies put out what is about like a half hour a piece, 20 minutes to a half hour a piece.
20 minutes was Sony's, 40 minutes was Nintendo's, actually.
Okay, so I averaged it.
Yeah,
with my half hour.
Yeah,
they there were just lots of announcements made in sort of a pre-TGS, Tokyo Game Show, just announcements, blast. They do these things periodically, both companies at this point. And there were, games shown on the Sony side. There were games shown for PS4, PS5, and PSVR 2. We actually did see gameplay footage from those. We'll talk about that a little bit. On the Nintendo side, it was, Switch focused. But we did see things like games for Switch, the cloud games, I should say. At least one cloud game. As well as, a lot of farm and life sim games.
On the Nintendo side, yeah.
On the Nintendo side, yeah. There were even, I think there was one or two even in the Sony side, but way more on the Switch.
Yeah. What were the big announcements from Nintendo?
From Nintendo, we got, the biggest one, which I'll just lead with, and it's the last one they showed in their trailers, was the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which has historically been referred to as Breath of the Wild 2, the sequel to Breath of the Wild. They showed very little actual game footage. They showed they showed like some close-ups of some of the weird tapestry type textures that they like to like hint at backstory with.
Yeah, and they did show again more of like his weird
sky
abilities.
Stuff. Yeah,
like creating like a pillar that would stack on top of it so he could climb indefinitely.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's some cool stuff. We don't really know much about the game. It looks like another big open world Zelda, which, I played through Breath of the Wild 1 and thoroughly enjoyed it. So I imagine if we're lucky, as long as it's fresh enough, it should be good.
Yeah.
The other big announcement, I'll say, from Nintendo itself. A lot of announcements on Nintendo's side did end up being, hey, this game that you might be familiar with from 10, 20, 30 years ago is now coming to the Switch, including GoldenEye, by the way, with online multiplayer.
Yeah, that was been long waited for, because I think everybody's known that there's a version of it that's been floating around that was for next generation or like available to new consoles, and they finally like, okay, we have it. Weirdly, Nintendo's the only company that's getting online multiplayer. For
GoldenEye. Yeah.
Which was not part of the original GoldenEye either.
Yeah, and that was sort of a final like one. There is one more thing at the end of a section where they were announcing if you pay for Nintendo's online services, I think you get access to the retro collection, and they added like Pilot Wings and a few other N64 games to that set. They also announced from Nintendo themselves was Pikmin 4. They actually had Miyamoto come on briefly to announce that one, and two other games that got big announcements were a new Fire Emblem game, if Fire Emblem is your jam, as well as Octopath Traveler 2, which is the first game. One. Yep, and the first one was like one of my favorite games of the Switch. And I'm very much looking forward to the second one. What they showed was enticing, so we'll see. Justin, what were some other? Were there any games that I missed that you want to highlight there in our initial review?
No, just Kirby. They had another 2D Kirby game that looked like I can't really explain what it looked. Almost looked like a battle game that you could go online with.
It seemed like they were talking about that Kirby game being a re-release, but I had no idea. I don't think I'd seen it before.
Yeah, it looks like it has aspects of other Kirby games. They re-release Kirby games all the time.
It's Kirby, especially now. It's Kirby's 30th anniversary or whatever.
But I think those are the big ones. It was mostly Japanese publishers, obviously. especially given that it was just before TGS. So I think this is largely a Nintendo State of Play or Nintendo Direct that was more was using games specifically that would appeal to a Japanese audience to continue their sort of strong performance in the Japanese market.
Yeah.
And RE1, or was it RE2, RE3, I think RE4, oh no, Resident Evil 7 are getting streaming releases. Like cloud versions of this game, so they're not being they're not being rendered on the console
locally.
Itself.
Yeah, they're which is it's. I guess if they can just switch to that, they can extend the life of the Switch even further.
Yes.
Beat Microsoft at their own game.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, that's basically what they're doing, right?
Yeah, sort of. Like internet required for play. Like, okay, as long as you say it on the box. People can buy it and have access to it. But
so we also got a PlayStation State of Play, which also longly awaited. I think the last time we got a State of Play type thing was for Gran Turismo I think it was after Gran Turismo, but it was in June. Oh, it was for Hogwarts. That's what it was. It's Hogwarts Legacy. We got that in June. So it's been quite some time since we got any sort of State of Play from Sony. What did we get in that one, Eric?
In that one we got, oh boy. Do you want to cover that one? The only one I really remember, there are two that I remember there. Tekken, a new Tekken game. I don't remember. Was it 8, 9?
8 or 9, yeah.
Yeah. Neither of us can remember the exact number.
I mean, I haven't played a Tekken game for
decades. Years. Yeah. So Tekken, there's a new one of the fighting game series, Tekken. New game coming out for that. And God of War Ragnarok, we got some more game footage. Sort of hinted at story in the trailer, but not really. Didn't give you enough to sort of get a sense of what it's going to be about. But it did show some cool visuals.
This certainly did. What else we got? We got, like you said, there's Tekken. Sony's publishing a Team Ninja game that I don't think I knew about. It's called Rise of Ronin.
I think that might be its like debut announcement.
It was debut announcement. Sony looks to have partnered with Team Ninja to release it as an exclusive console release. It'll probably go to PC, but for consoles, it's only coming to the PlayStation platform. Rise of Ronin looks like Ghost of Tsushima if you have the action of a Team Ninja game where it's like crazy moves and that sort of thing. Which looked interesting. Graphically, it wasn't very impressive, but it was a surprise at the very least. Sony's also publishing Project Eve, which is a Korean studio that's developing I think it's running on UE5 for one, and then, or if not, it's UE4 plus a bunch of new changes to make it some of the new graphic processes that UE5 can handle. But that's being developed by a Korean studio. It kind of looks like a Devil May Cry-ish game. I know people who are fans of those type of games have been pretty hyped about this. It will be PlayStation 5 exclusive. Won't be coming to Xbox as far as I know. It's being Sony published, so that's why I don't think it will be, but it'll probably make its way to PC at some time and afterwards. They also showed Hogwarts game footage again, but we also had a State of Play entirely dedicated to Hogwarts Legacy. So we just got an update, I guess. We were told about remasters for Yakuza games, and I think we got a new Yakuza game that's under like the Dragon types that was talked about and shown off at TGS today. And then as you said, the first real look at that's the weirdest thing, right? The first real look at God of War. God of War is scheduled for a November release.
Yeah.
All the big Sony titles have gotten these big State of Plays, and we keep getting like this drip feed of information from God of War, and I do not understand this at all, or the strategy behind their communication around it.
Yeah, we did. The last trailer that they showed of it when they did there was the initial teaser, which was just the logo, and then they did one other trailer beforehand that showed more, but it looked not like it was sort of running on PS4 Pro tier
Yeah, that was
hardware.
when we got their last big like showcase, which we
Right,
still
right,
haven't got for this year, but it was the one that happened I think in like September last year. That's
right,
the first real look that we got at the gameplay, and then since then we got nothing else, which was weird. It's
right.
weird. It's very
Uh,
weird.
it is somewhat strange. It's like everyone's holding all the major companies are holding their breath. They don't want to go first on their big announcements.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually kind of gets into where we can talk about this, right? Like,
Yeah,
for one, people's hype levels for both of these announcements are huge. And I think in part it's because this year has been strange. And I think it's the fallout from COVID and people working from home. But like game releases this year have been kind of shored up a bit. And the big, like AAA huge releases that were expected for this year have been like slowly getting knocked off into next year. Um, yeah, even with Microsoft, like their only big title they've been able to get out this year is well that we
Star Citizen.
Starfield, and we're not even sure if
Yeah,
it's actually going to be releasing. They have I think a November release date set for it,
yeah,
but
Starfield
I
does.
have a feeling it's Starfield actually got bumped, didn't it?
Uh,
I think it originally had a
uh,
November release, and now it's in
yes,
early spring.
it's a 2023.
Yeah, so like Xbox's big releases, they're like, that's not going to happen. They got Halo this year, which was bumped from the launch year of Halo or of the Xbox.
Series.
Yeah, the series' release. PlayStation's big release. They had a couple. I mean, they had Horizon, they had Gran Turismo,
Yep.
and
God of
that's
War.
it. God of War will be the next one, and that's still supposedly a November release, unless something happens. And the fact that they've been so
Yeah.
quiet, I think, is what's causing for concern. And then Nintendo has been able to plug along, but Nintendo's had a really strange strategy in the past like 2 years where they've been eager to release Wii U ports, and the bigger games that are new for the Switch have been much smaller in scale compared to like a Zelda or Mario. So it feels like Nintendo's like really dragging out their big title releases and not announcing them for any time soon for what presumably is what will presumably happen is the launch on a brand new console that we've still haven't been told anything about.
That will likely have backwards compatibility.
To some degree, right? But
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I think so. People have been really eager, so I think people had a lot of expectations for these, and a lot of people were let down by what we actually saw. But it's not surprising what we saw, given that it's proximity to TGS, and that both Sony and Nintendo were showing off like their games that would most appeal to either a Japanese audience or the titles that they were going to show anyways. What was your kind of take on these, and what do you think it says about each company?
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo, it feels like Nintendo may be fighting a bit of the dumping ground. Um, or sort actually, it could be that they're embracing, that may be the better way to put it, that they're embracing being a dumping ground for games, right?
Right.
Like every publisher wants to take every single possible game that they've ever made and get it on the Switch in the hopes that they'll like get more money out of the long tail. If they can port it cheap enough, they'll get it on there and, hopefully entice people who have fond memories of older games to partake. Even themselves, I looked it up, and the Kirby's Dreamland, the Kirby game that we were discussing is called Kirby Return to Dreamland, and the one that was the original game, and that was for the Wii. This is called Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe, which is sort of a remake or an update to that.
The strategy that
Gonna
they've
be
kind of
released.
taken over and over
Yeah.
again. Where they're just like, we have this Wii game, so let's
Yeah.
just port it.
Well, a lot of the Wii U games, like they made all these really cool Wii U games, and no one played them because no one bought a Wii U.
Yeah.
And so they spent like Mario Kart 8, I think, and Super Mario Brothers Wii U or whatever it was, like the new Super Mario Brothers Deluxe U or something like that.
Right.
They redid that for the Switch. and now they're doing this one, which was a Wii game, so even older. But Nintendo themselves are doing it. It's not surprising that we have Squaresoft doing, I think Squaresoft doing Front Mission, which is like an old mech game. Front Mission 2, Front Mission 3, which is weird. They announced Front Mission, which is coming out in November. Front Mission 2, which is coming out in next year, 2023, and then in the future is Front Mission 3. Now, what's weird for us about that is that Nintendo themselves haven't really done the traditional, hey, these are the cool Nintendo games that are coming, be excited because they're coming for your current console. They're doing what normally, traditionally, Nintendo has done when they're holding back their cards for a big announcement with a new console, and that's something that Justin sort of alluded to earlier. That feels a little bit like they're going to be announcing something, and in the meantime are happy to just be like, hey, it's been 30 years since anyone played GoldenEye, so what if we bring that back up? Right. And a lot of other companies are doing that as well. There's a lot of these smaller things that are like the Front Mission games that are coming back, that are being brought in. Even to an extent, there's the Resident Evil games. I think 1, 2, and 3, which were being redone. I think those were at some point also released on GameCube or something like that.
Well, 1, 2, and right.
I think 0 and 1 at least were.
0 and 1 were re-released, but 2 and 3 were remastered already for the PlayStation 4, Xbox
One. Yeah, and so now they're bringing it into the Switch.
Yeah, now they're going we'll bring them to the Switch, but not natively. We'll run them on the cloud.
Right, and the same, especially Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy Crisis Core Plus or whatever it is. That's Square Enix redoing a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, re-releasing that on the Switch. You see, there's this thread of games that had already been done, and they're now reappearing on the Switch or being re-released on the Switch. That's thus the dumping ground of if anyone has, you've got a game in your backlog or in your closet that's not been seen the light of day for a while. Yeah, why don't you bring it out and put it on the Switch? Why not?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Well, I think what's weird about the Switch now, and I think, and I can't say I'm not a Nintendo insider, but yeah. I don't think Nintendo was expecting the success that they'd have leading up to 2020 and following through. Yeah. And as a result, they probably took a step back and said, well, there's a bunch of new owners of Switch consoles that we can sell our back catalog to, and we can sell stuff that, from the Wii U, that didn't sell well, and take a crack at it. And they're allowing that just to steep a bit longer. I would have imagined if the pandemic didn't happen, we may have already seen a brand new Switch, or a Switch 2 or Switch Pro or whatever they're going to be calling the thing, at this point, at least announced and being either ready to be released or have already released. But I think that whole roadmap got very badly disrupted, and they're just like, all right, well, instead of doing that, we can put 6-month development time frames on Wii U games and get them ported to the Switch and have a new piece of content available for people. Because of Nintendo consoles, the Switch is an outlier in which it's only gotten one new Mario game. It's only gotten one new Zelda game. It did get a Metroid game, which, to be fair, is new, but it wasn't Nintendo developed. It was a third-party studio.
Yeah, but also the Zelda thing, I was actually going to bring up. The Zelda point is also sort of interesting because on the GameCube, the big Zelda, I mean, I guess there was sort of two. The second one was, the first one was Twilight Princess.
No. On the Wii? Or on the GameCube?
No, on the GameCube. I'm sorry. It was also not that. It was...
Wind Waker.
Yeah, Wind Waker. I was thinking the Japanese title. So there's Wind Waker, and then there was Twilight Princess. And then I think, actually, maybe it even had a third. I thought it was...
Twilight Princess
was able...
Go ahead.
That's right. It was the bridge one. Twilight Princess was the bridge. This is where we start seeing things. This is the point I wanted to bring up. Twilight Princess, the Zelda game, was a bridge title. It launched on both the GameCube and the Wii. I don't remember if Skyward Sword, which was the next title of the next Zelda game, was also a bridge one, but it was, I think, Wii only.
Skyward Sword wasn't, but they ended up re-releasing it on Wii U.
The Wii U, Skyward Sword U
Right.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
Actually,
Yeah.
and same thing with like Wind Waker.
Yeah.
But then, uh,
Then
yeah, Wii
Breath
U
of the
was not a successful console for Nintendo, so it's kind of more understandable that you saw lesser releases on it.
Right. But we had again Zelda again. Breath of the Wild was another
Both.
bridge title. It
Yeah.
was released for both Wii U and the Switch. And so like the thought here is, well, it's now been 6-7 years, I think, since Breath of the Wild released, something like that. So we're at the point now where that's usually the lifespan of a console. And if they're releasing Zelda, next year, there's a good chance that if the stars align, then that might have been the point at which they were saying, "Oh, our next game console will also be a bridge one." Well, yes,
Yeah.
we'll make the game work on the Switch, but it will also be working on this new console. Now, as Justin pointed out, the pandemic may have thrown their original like plans out of whack and said, "Oh my God, this thing is printing money. We can't try to like tilt the cart now."
Yeah.
The T cart. We need to just like push that down into the massive people that want to buy stuff off of it. So we'll keep doing that, and then whatever specs we had built and models we built, let's just keep iterating and sort of bump everything up with the assumption that we're going to get another year or two out of this thing before we're going to need to make that jump.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
so
it's opportune for them too, right? With given like manufacturing constraints, like no one should be releasing new hardware now. I mean, both PlayStation and Xbox couldn't have predicted that the pandemic was going to happen the release year that they planned to release new consoles,
Right.
and they had like that was well underway. Maybe it was smart for them to push it off a year, but the fact of the matter is that they had to switch strategies as well, and suddenly Sony was like, well, actually, all of our new games are going to be cross-compatible because we can't fulfill the manufacturing need or the demand right now. So, we're gonna make everything cross generation to seize the most users and whatever.
yeah, I'll also, the one other thing I want to add is that to go back to the unless you have something you want to say about that thread, I want to go back to the previous thread.
Go ahead.
Okay, the previous thread, real quick. What things can we divine from Nintendo's announcements? The one other thing I wanted to call up was the fact, and a lot of people have brought this up and said like all the games, or like a huge number of the games that Nintendo showed off were farming or life simulators. They had some aspect of you're in this town and you arrive and you have to farm and build a house and build your community and do little tasks and jobs. And, it was notable because there were literally 5 or 6 titles that focused on that, and then another handful of other ones that had elements of it. And I think this may be echoes of the success of games like Stardew Valley and that was the next one I was going to mention. Yeah. Animal Crossing, that was huge. I think that's possibly the number one seller on the Switch.
No, Mario Kart is, but Mario Kart's been bundled, so it's hard to say.
Right. I should say next to Mario Kart, I think.
Which is weird because Animal Crossing was never a huge performer until pandemic hit.
Yeah, pandemic. Right. So people saw that there was this huge hunger for this type of game, especially during pandemic years. A lot of people started up games like that, and we're just seeing them start to release now, is my sense of it. We're seeing this sort of wave happening. And that actually includes some titles from the PlayStation 2 era, I think, that are being brought forth and added to the pile on Switch. So here we are.
Yeah, no, it's a weird. It has been such a weird gaming time frame, like a new console generation that can't really kick off because delays in development because of work from home and manufacturing delays, and Nintendo should have launched a new console by now, but they're holding back, and it's all this everything just seems very like royally messed up, and plus. Microsoft's like, no, new strategy. We're not in the business of selling consoles. We're in this business of streaming games, which has all changed everything. Do you have any feelings on Sony's state of play?
I have less feelings about Sony's state of play. I prefer to hear yours if you have any that are lined up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think in general, I mean, there are two of the big announcements: the Tekken and the at least for me, the Tekken is notable because of its sort of cultural history, and God of War simply because the revitalized and much loved IP is the next big one in Sony's sort of like story-driven game canon.
Yeah.
And those have been consistently excellent. So it's sort of like, okay, great. I'm very much looking forward to that. Outside of that, like there was very little that stuck out to me as something indicative of a trend or whatever. A lot of it was also Japanese based, so it's and appealing to Japanese customers and audiences. So that's not me.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts?
No, I mean, I think what it does show is that Sony's support within the Japanese developers is waning. The PlayStation 5, and the PS4 was reasonably successful within Japan, but clearly the Switch is the console of choice for most.
Oh yeah.
Denizens of Japan, but Japan again is not the same market it was, when we were growing up, and like the Nintendo was the biggest thing. So like having the attention of the Japanese market is not really the most important thing for most global, companies, including Sony. Even though like they're the birthplace of Sony is Japan, and the birthplace of PlayStation, a lot of its initial strength was from Japanese developers. It's just not as important as it was before. And I think you kind of see this in their lineup. Like this is a Japanese focused lineup of games, and the games that they showed off really did not have the same sort of focus that you see like with like Nintendo. Like Nintendo's like, here's all these Stardew Valley type games, and things that use chibi characters. And Square Enix is fully invested in this platform. And with PlayStation, it was like, here's games that we think will appeal to the Japanese audience for those who have a PS5. God of War typically is not one of those, and so here's an announcement that's preceding TGS, and they showed God of War, which would not normally, I think, be shown in a Japanese specific showcase. I think it also says that I don't think we have a good idea. Like we given Sony's track record, they always have a big showcase every year. And last year we got it in September, which was a bit odd because usually it happens during E3, but last year they said E3's not happening, so we're not going to be doing it. And they pushed it into September, and I think it was actually 2 weeks after TGS, if I recall, like the 28th or something, or maybe the 21st. And I think what we saw here indicates, we haven't got that's even though we've been waiting for State of Play, this is not the State of Play that that Sony big showcase is about. I think we should still probably expect that within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
Fingers crossed. It could be that they are just holding all their cards for a big 2023.
I mean, that could be the case. I mean, at a minimum, I would expect some sort of God of War showcase. I still find it very strange that we knew God of War was in development from like 4 years ago, the Ragnarok. Yeah. The first time we got a trailer was last September, and that showed some gameplay, but it was like very rapid pace, rapid clips. Then we got a non-gameplay trailer this year. We got like a announcement of the release date with that, and then like the console went on sale with no additional gameplay footage. And then we finally got like a new set of gameplay footage outside of like a couple clips here and there that were coming out like within interviews, where we finally got, okay, like here's more gameplay, but we still don't have like what Sony usually does with the story-driven games, where we're gonna show you 10 minutes of
actual gameplay.
Yeah, of like, here's a story segment that we want to show you. Yep. And we're not getting that. It's very strange for a game that's supposed to be releasing within a couple of months. It has
maybe
probably
there's some big story thing.
That, or they're waiting for it to go gold, which I would imagine goes gold, this month. It has to go gold this month, I would imagine.
I think they could. Usually it's like 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, if it's November 20th or something like that, right?
It is, but that's also probably because they have to print a bunch of copies for the holiday
Yeah.
rush.
Oh, no, they totally do. And I think, that with a lead time of a few weeks to get to stores is probably enough.
Yeah.
Um, Provided, of course, the supply chain is not a problem today for
For
discs.
printing discs, it tends to be domestic printing of discs, so I don't think it would be a supply chain issue, at least not for the domestic markets. Plus, you
Yeah,
can digitally transfer a file and then send it off to any other local distributor. Uh,
yeah,
I have a feeling that the game is going to be gold soon because we're actually beginning to see people who worked at Santa Monica Studio beginning to talk, which would indicate that they're no longer heads down, and maybe that's why we can expect some sort of demo, maybe in a couple of weeks that they're going to be able to put together. But who knows?
I hope they get a good break. Hey, what do you think about how excited? Let me back that up. How excited are you for PlayStation Stars?
Oh, Stars is like their weird program.
Yeah, that you can get collectibles, digital collectibles.
I mean, I never really even cared about trophies, so I don't see how like digital doodads that don't have a real impact
Yep.
or
Yeah, so
anything.
for those who don't know, they showed off these little sort of like trophy toy stands that were all completely virtual and rendered in theoretically the PlayStation UI. And somehow you get these by playing various games and achieving certain metrics or tasks that Sony, parent company Sony, decides
Yeah.
for you. It's sort of unclear, but what they showed honestly looked identical to the little gotcha toys that you pick up in Astro's
Playroom.
playroom
Yeah.
or whatever that is. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if like Astro's Playroom devs were in
working on that.
part, yeah, working on it because they tend to not work on like
Team
full games.
Asobi.
Yeah, exactly. They tend to be like an internal R&D team that works on
Yeah,
aspects. So
experiences.
yeah,
Oh, speaking of internal R&D team, sort of PSVR 2. What did you think of the first sort of game footage that they showed?
I mean, it looks promising. I like the problem is I don't know the price tag for PSVR 2, which again, we know it's being released next year. We have not gotten a big announcement about this. I think there's something soon. I just don't know when that's going to have PSVR 2, God of War, and probably a handful of updates from games that we haven't even heard of or games that we have heard of but we haven't seen a gameplay from. But
Yeah.
it looks promising. The fidelity, I mean, it's not PS5 fidelity unlike some of the
No.
higher performing games, but it's up
They
there.
Yeah, the thing they showed two games, a Star Wars game, um,
They
Galaxy.
showed more than two. Well, maybe not in that, but they showed at
We,
TGS. They've already
we
shown more.
yeah, we know more titles total, but I think they only showed two. Tales from the Galaxy's Edge,
Hmm.
Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge Enhanced Edition was one, and then the other one was a like D&D style tabletop board game that you play like moving. It's a cards board game called Demio
Yeah,
that they showed off, which that looked good, but that looked really good. But of course, it's basically they had to just recreate like a table with miniatures on it.
yeah.
Versus Star Wars, where they were trying to recreate an entire world. And the one thing that I noticed missing that sort of broke some of the for me at least, looking at it not in the space, it's totally different when you're in VR, but watching it from having just seen like Tekken 8
Yeah.
and then switching to this was like there's no shadows.
Yeah.
People are floating in the world because there's no shadows, because it turns out that's hard to render.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to render at high resolution at high frame rates.
High
Which
frame
is,
rates, yeah.
part of the issues with VR.
Right.
I wonder if too though, like what we're seeing is like when we get the video of the PSVR 2, we're seeing it without foveated rendering, which allows you to focus more resources on
That's
where
true.
your eyes are focused. So I wonder if
Yep.
the in-game experience versus what you see as like the output is different as well.
It could also be, keep in mind that I think foveated rendering is a thing that engines can take advantage of. It's a feature that they can adjust, and it looks like the Star Wars title is it's an enhanced edition, which likely I'm not super familiar with existing VR games because I don't have a way to play them. But it sounds like that's a game that's already been launched, and this is going to be a PSVR 2 version of it. And the engine that the original game was built on may not have affordances for that, and to keep costs down, they just may not do it.
Developed with the uh, Meta Quest 2 in mind.
Yeah,
Um,
Quest 2, yeah.
the other thing we did see, we saw. Well, I'm not sure in that trailer, but we certainly have seen it at TGS now. Was Horizon Call of the Wild, or
Yep.
Call of the Mountain, excuse me, which is, I mean, it looks kind of like in the same immersion level as Half-Life Alyx, like that sort of interaction. It looks pretty good. It looks very much like a VR game. Like the sort of like the situations you're put in seems very much
Yeah.
focused around the fact that as a VR platform, you can't really move. So you move
Yeah.
slowly, and the enemies react that way, or enemies completely react, like ignore you, unlike they would in the game, where they like as soon as you're within like 20 feet from them, they're like, "I'm killing you." So
Yeah.
you don't get that same sort of thing in Call of the Mountain. We saw what's it called? Walking Dead. I can't remember the name of what the sub name of that is. That looked okay. Like it didn't look anything special,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's a Walking Dead game. And we also saw Resident Evil 7 they showed that off today at the Resident Evil
The VR
conference
one.
thing. Yeah. Well, it's
Yep.
not the VR. It's like Resident Evil 7, but they apparently made a full VR either
Yeah.
experience, or the game is playable in VR. But I do not understand how you could take a game that is a first-person game that runs like with full controls into a VR experience where it goes back to like RE1 days, where like your movement and agility is very much compromised.
Yeah. So for those who've never experienced the VR stuff, early VR game developers discovered that if you try to enable typical game style movement where you could just move a joystick and the camera goes, um, makes people very sick very quickly. The disconnect, there's no acceleration. Your inner ear is not feeling any acceleration to match what your eyes are seeing, and because it's so immersive, you feel like something's happening and taking control of you. And you don't really know how to process it. It makes you feel. Most people get to feel very sick very quickly.
Yeah.
So to work around this, games sort of jump through hoops. And one of the things that they do is have like teleportation. You can point to a location and teleport to it. In some games, in other games, you click on a location and it takes you to a preset
Yeah.
area. Those who have played old like CD-ROM Windows style puzzle games like Myst, it's sort of like that, except that you can look around and not just have a fixed image. It's a fixed position in the world, and you can kind of like peer around things, but you can't just sort of walk through. You go warped between locations. So we suspect that there may be some of that going on.
Yeah, and it looks like the Resident Evil experience has been compromised. Like what they were showing
Yeah,
is like
yeah,
a
yeah.
new game mode where you get to play as
A different character.
yeah, I can't remember her name, but it's like the tall vampire lady.
Uh,
She has a name.
she does. And I think it starts with it's like the Countess
Demetria or
Dimistrescu or
yeah,
something.
whatever the hell. Yeah,
Uh,
Thomas
uh,
Q. Yeah, lady, whatever it is, her. You get to play as her, and like the gameplay I saw was the character moving back while like these wolf bad guys that are in the game are coming after you, and then she like set a bunch of bats on them. I was like, well, that doesn't seem like Resident Evil gameplay at all. So we'll see how it turns out. Like they were able to successfully do it with Resident Evil. What is it? 7? I think yeah, Resident Evil.
well, Village is 7.
No, that's 8.
Is it? VI?
Yeah, I think,
yeah,
I,
you're
think I
right.
just um,
Mix them up.
mixed them up. Yeah, Resident Evil 8 is the one with Lady Dimitri.
Yeah,
And
Dimitrescu. Lady Dimitrescu.
very
They make it
whatever,
easy.
Romanian sounding or wherever they intended to stage the game. Yeah, but that is getting a VR mode. 7 already has a VR mode. Like you can play the full game in VR, but that game was also like a corridor crawler, so it's different. Or at least I think it's different. So I don't know. I'm sure they're going to get it to work. They have experience doing it, and they know what they're doing. So I think that should be interesting for anybody who's going to pick up PSVR 2, whatever, in the next half a year. Yep.
It's promising. We'll see.
All right, let's go on to the final topic. And this
Woo!
is Unity. We're focused on developers. Do you want to talk about
Yeah.
this?
Sure. So Unity had quite a month, or a month and a half or
Yeah, it was like
whatever.
2 months. Yeah.
Yeah, recently. Um, they made a bunch of sort of strategic purchases and extremely unstrategic statements, unfortunate statements publicly that um, have drawn the ire of game developers, or of a large enough, loud enough population to make splashes in the industry. The two major strategic moves that they made that caused some ire, that drew some ire from the developers, were, the first one is that they spent actually there's three. They spent billions of dollars on acquiring a company called Iron Source, which is sort of an ad focused thing.
At a minimum, they also have their background
right.
in yanking data off of people's computers in a way that has been rendered or has been considered malware by some browsers.
Yeah, I think the details of that are that Iron Source was used. So Iron Source's technology was used to enable that workflow, but that it was the payload that actually did that data exfiltration was not them.
Yeah.
Regardless, that caused their stuff, Iron Source's executables, their code, to be flagged as malware.
Yeah.
So, you look up Iron Source and malware and you'll get hits. And regardless, it's like, it's all ads, which are things that at least most developers, there are the people in game studios who do biz dev. They're usually off behind closed doors from the rest of the development team, which makes up the majority of the studio. So, and the people actually working with Unity day to day are the artists, the programmers, the level designers, the game designers. Those are the people who interface with Unity a lot. And for them to see this huge push for ads, this announcement is like, ugh. Like, no one likes to look at ads, and here we are being shills for them.
Yeah.
And so, like, that wasn't great, and the optics weren't great, especially given how much money it was, especially given the two next points I'm going to make. And the first one was that they very shortly thereafter announced layoffs.
Yeah.
Big, relatively large for their size. It was like something like 10%.
What was it, 11 or 12% layoff? It was
something on that order. I think.
It was pretty sizable.
Yeah. And they shut down, like, part of that was shutting down a team where they were internally building a game so that they could dog food their products. And they were there, and do something creative internally, which is something that Epic does with Unreal. Fortnite is their stuff, but they also have the engine. So they shut down this stuff, or they had the layoffs, which doesn't look good when you spend billions of dollars on a deal with an ad company. You're like, wait, you're spending all this money on the ad company. Why don't you?
Yeah.
Why are you then paying for that by, like, firing your actual developers who work on the core engine? Cool, thanks. And then, of course, this isn't an announcement so much as one of the unfortunate communications. John Riccitello, the CEO of Unity, came out with his people who don't start looking at monetization very early in their game development process are fucking idiots. Comment, and excuse the French there, but that was the actual terms that he used in the interview, and the fallout from that was swift, and people caused lots of fun hashtags on Twitter and other social networks, and basically a lot of people were, I think, venting some built-up frustration of having to deal with Unity seeming to ignore stability in the editor when working with it and other development related issues, and seeming to focus on industries that weren't game related, and trying to make all these big announcements that feel, as game developers, like, where are we? Like, do we matter anymore? Right. We helped you build this. You built it on our backs. Like, I guess we're nothing now. And that is sort of the background for what's coming up. The last piece, by the way, that I'll mention in Unity's like rough couple months is that they announced in partnership with some other company that they are working on Department of Defense projects, which, DoD means military in American parlance.
Yeah.
And a lot of game developers, Unity is a global software, and there are lots of people outside of the U.S. who are like, wait, what? And then there are even people within the U.S. who are like, no, I don't want the money I spend on you to go towards like war machines and that kind of thing, right? So the optics, again, weren't super great for that. We have all of these pieces coming together, and now some executives at Unity with all that background have come forth and are saying, we need to refocus on our game developers. Justin, do you have any words on what they came out and said and brought up?
Yeah, I mean, their main thing was to sit there. It's actually we saw this too from John Riccatello. I think he sat down with like a Unity blog to be like, look how much we're focusing on game developers. But I think the general sentiment amongst the game developers who are using Unity as a platform feel like the platform is good enough to be able to, and it's free for that matter, for non-pro licenses. And I think there's like a sort of user like or per seat cap that once you go over it, you're supposed to move into the enterprise license space. But regardless, Riccatello sat down sat down to do an interview with one of the YouTube channels that focus on Unity to try to directly talk to the game development space. And I think this is now an initiative that's pretty clear that I'm not entirely sure if game developers are the bread and butter of the company at this point, but it's certainly what the company was founded on. And if they don't have people stressing the engine like game developers do and trying to push it forward, then the other places in like visualization and enterprise level falters too, and they cannot abandon game developers and not see some kind of hit in what people expect from modern day game engine. And this is the same thing with Unreal, but I think Unreal handles its developers a bit differently than Unity does. Unreal became what it is and has so many places in industrial application because they've kind of been pushing their real-time 3D rendering to the point where it can actually even work for movies. So that all said, Unity rolls out SVP Mark Whitten and Ralph Howert or Hewert.
I think he might be Hewert. Howard? Howard? I don't know. Ralph.
Yeah.
Mark and Ralph.
They talk to game developer daily or whatever the IGDA publication is. Yeah. Whatever that's formally called now. It used to have a name before, which is Gama Sutra, and that's no longer a thing. And they were kind of rolled out to acknowledge things and address some of the problems, and I think it's kind of a mixed bag of how they handled things. They mostly acknowledge that their communication with the game development community has not been good. They attribute it to everybody's been heads down and trying to start all these different initiatives, that they've just not really been good about talking to the game developers themselves and making sure that the changes that Unity is seeing, what that actually means for game developers and how it might help them. So that piece has been gone, and the only real communication we had was like John Riccatello doing an offensive interview to game developers, at least, that did not go over well. They also addressed the DoD contractor thing, where they're working with a DoD contractor, but they acknowledged it at least. It's not like they denied it, but they also had said, "Hey, we're working with, it's not." The DoD doesn't just mean weapons. It's NASA. It's a bunch of other scientific endeavors that aren't necessarily directly to like blowing people up or shooting people, and it can be for a lot of other interesting applications. And they did say that they had a red line that they don't cross.
Right.
However, they didn't say what that red line was.
So
I mean, that's kind of what they mostly address. I think they talked in length, and there may be a longer video that you can find on Game Developer that has more of their interview. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what they handled. What do you think of their new initiative, and how do you think it's working so far? I mean, even given like two
I
reviews.
Yeah, it's really hard to say because this is they seem to be stating this and having conversations with uh um the game publications, but we haven't really seen much in the way of meaningful movement from the company in terms of what Unity's doing. Yeah, like a few days ago, Unity upped all their prices.
Right.
That was another piece of news we just didn't mention, but Unity increased their prices.
On enterprise and
So
up, yeah. Not
pro and up,
pro and up, yeah. Sorry, but pro,
right?
yeah.
So
Which
not plus.
I'm not. The amount that they raised it by was not significant.
No, and they do have to face the same as we all do,
Yeah.
inflation.
Yeah. I mean, for them, I think at this point, it's like mostly just profit. Like it's just there as a vehicle to make money. But I think there is a fairness in it where it's like, on an enterprise level, like the yearly cost is not that much, and you're like, okay, if you're a company and you're making billions of dollars off a game on Unity's software, and you're paying $10,000 to have access for your studios, that seems like a really cheap bargain.
Well, it worked out. Their enterprise per customer, if you made the most use of the deal, they sold in buckets of size 20, as I understood it, in
Yeah.
their old model.
Do they
So
still
if
do
you
profit
were,
sharing too? I think they cut that out, right?
I think they did. I know Unreal's takes 5% back end royalties after you hit for
A certain
everything you
amount,
sell over. It's like $150,000 or something.
Yeah.
But Unity is just, you can use it for free if you're not funded or your yearly income as a company is 150,000 or less.
Right.
And outside of that, you have to start paying for either plus or pro tiers, which get you different perks. Their plus tier remained the same. Their pro tier went up a bit, and their enterprise tier actually went slightly down. If you had your company was in sizes of increments of 20.
Yeah.
Because they sold it in these 20 seat things, and if you used all 20 seats, then it worked out to be $4,000 per seat. But if you only had 10 people, then it was $8,000 per seat. So that's what they were doing, right? Now they just have a blanket $3,000 per seat per year.
Yeah.
It just makes it much simpler to do math, and you don't have to be like, well, we have 21 people. So
yeah.
what do we, that sort of makes it a bad deal for us. I guess we shrink to 20. They probably had people that they would work with behind the scenes to like figure out what works for them as a company.
Right.
But regardless, that's they did sort of unify it to be per seat licensing across the board. They adjusted things. Most of the tiers got something additional as well, though they're not necessarily things that developers are going to be able to take advantage of. I think Pro got access to Unity Mars, which is their implementation for VR and AR. They have tools that help people develop those types of products, as well as the Havoc physics engine access.
Yeah.
Which you're not making necessarily a 3D physics-based game, then
right,
maybe it's not going to do you any good. But so there are movements here. There's not much in the way there that comes as messaging to the hordes of game developers that use Unity day to day. They've had a series of blog entries that they've released recently, which for a while, all the blog entries were corporate jargon that was like, we're making inroads into look at us help the construction and the automotive industries, and like basically anything but games.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, I think this comes down to like the communication issues where it's just like,
yes,
they came as for a while they were very corporate, and it was not translating to better experience or better necessarily I guess better experience for the developers. And it was clear their focus was getting turned elsewhere. They want to be competitive with Unreal and be able to be in the same markets that Unreal was and offer solutions there, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
it, directly talking to the audience is important, and it's okay. Like this might be a good first step for people to directly be addressed by them, but the way they communicated in this was highly defensive, right? They're defending their point and going, "Well, actually, there's a reason why we do this. Like, of course, there's a reason why you do that, but you have to acknowledge that either, yeah, we're doing this, but here's how it benefits you," which wasn't really the case. And not only that, like if they're talking about, hey, like in the same sentence, they're going, we really need to communicate more, and we acknowledge that this is a problem, and we're going to do more to address it. And then they go, hey, we have a red line with this DoD thing, but we can't tell you what that red line is. You're like, you're not really improving your communication here. Yeah. It's not to say that it won't, but like if I were to grade how their communication has improved, the most improvement I've seen is that they're actually beginning to directly address some of the problems, but they're just not directly addressing it in a way that doesn't feel like they're meeting the criticisms of the development community. They're playing like defense for the company, which they probably shouldn't be doing when you have a backlog of complaints that they now need to address.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are serious concerns there, and I think for a lot of people, the communication has for so long been just about what they can do to increase their market valuation. So it's almost like this is more for investors and see what is it? One of the channels that have the stock market tickers on it all the time.
Oh yeah. C-SPAN. No.
C-SPAN. I was about to say C-SPAN too, but that's the government one.
Yes, it is. And
I don't know, Market Watch, whatever those TV shows are, right? Like they want to make headlines on those types of shows instead of
Bloomberg.
And that's what they're.
There we go. That's one.
Yeah, Bloomberg. They're communicating for Bloomberg. They're not communicating for game developers, and they're using their blog to do it, which is where they've done things like serialization in Unity or like how to get your shaders to render a certain way, and suddenly it's like Unity is making a fantastic partnership with IronSource to help people monetize their game post-release, and you're like, that's not meaningful to me as a developer. I like, you don't even link to details about how I can use this. This is just a PR announcement.
Right.
Right. Just put that in the PR. Like, why is that in your blog? Go to put that in your standard PR output. Yeah. But I guess they use their blog as their PR in many ways. But that's the thing. Like it's sort of soured. Game developers have been sort of soured on Unity's communications
towards Unity, and has been soured by basically their move towards corporate governance. And I think it makes sense, right? Like they became publicly traded a couple of years ago. There was probably a move to remove game engineers from being the executive group and putting in people who have extensive business experience. But just because you have extensive business experience does not mean that you have extensive game development experience. And like John Riccitiello is an example of this. And John Riccitiello was not a loved person even at EA. He came from EA, but he wasn't like loved there. I think he worked for Xbox at some point too. Is that correct?
I don't remember. No, you might be. I think you're crossing lines with the CEO that was just before the EA CEO that was just before John.
Yeah. Well, either way, Riccitiello was not loved there as well, because that was it marked a move within EA to bring in things like loot boxes and multiplayer games, and a move of a direction away from single player experiences that no one really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think when I read a thing recently that when he resigned as CEO or left the company, he mentioned that there was one thing where he was like apologizing for pushing so hard for that because I think it actually like tanked and one or more IPs, and it did not work out for EA.
Yeah, Dead Space. It was at least one of them.
At least one. That one.
Another one. Yeah, there's a handful of like EA single player games. Not that EA has a great track record of. I mean, they have a long track record, but I feel like it's pretty selective within EA's repertoire. That you're 10% of those are games that I really enjoy, but otherwise it's perennial Madden, Battlefield, etc. types. But yeah, not Call of Duty. Medal of Honor's gone, right? Medal of Honor was a pretty liked series. Burnout was another one. Yeah, all these things are gone, at least for now. So yeah, I mean, I don't think even bringing in someone like Riccatello to be like, well, no, he's someone who's a senior management that also knows games. You're like, but he doesn't really know games. I think it's been shown over and over again that he doesn't really know the game developer audience or the gamers audience, but he does know how to like run a company, which is why.
Yeah, it's the business.
Yeah.
He really knows game business at a scale that very, very few could comprehend. Like,
yeah. But I think if there's anything to learn from EA, it's just like, you have to balance these things. You can have your perennial games, and you have to take breaks with how often you produce them, and you need to reinvest in new IP, and you have to have those new IP be interesting and give them an adequate amount of development time, while you pull money from a Dota game or whatever it is. It's not Dota. What game is it that Apex? Apex Legends, while they like make their tons of money off of Apex, they also need to make like a Jedi Fallen Order or a Titanfall.
It's arena shooter.
Yeah, Apex is the one that's done by.
Yeah, like Apex Legends.
Yes.
Or I guess it would be EA.
Yeah. I'm not mistaken. I got it right.
Respawn
Entertainment, right? So like,
yeah,
they have to balance that, and I think they're beginning to learn that lesson now. Like, you can reinvest in IPs and take some of the money that you're siphoning off of these types of things or these types of games, and reinvest it in stuff that caters to your core audience that has kept you afloat. And I think Unity may be realizing this too. It's like, you can't abandon your game developers in favor of new businesses that look lucrative on paper. It may very well be, but it's like it's the game developers that are pushing the advance of your technology. So you really need to keep them around and trust their opinions on stuff, even if they tend to be vocal and obnoxious. So, anyways, any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think let me say I said no, and what I mean by that is not especially. I have hopes, and that is that Unity will be able to turn this around and be more direct in their communication with game developers and speak to what game developers are really concerned about and what they really want to do.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're moving in that direction with their recent blog series. They've been doing a lot of here's what we're doing to update and support game development going forward. I've skimmed some of the articles, and they're sort of light on detail, but it's hard to get into a broad topic at depth in a blog entry. But if they can keep that up and actually start, I think one of the entries was, we're going to be talking. It was a sort of an introduction for a series. And it says, in this upcoming series, we're going to dig into specific features that we're enhancing or we're working on over the next year or two cycle. And we're going to dig into that and give you guys previews of what's coming and how we're working with it and get your feedback.
Yeah.
Which that's the type of conversation game developers want to hear. We want to know what's coming for the engine. We want to know what our capabilities are going to be, what fixes are coming and enhancements to the engine to make our lives and therefore the lives of our players better. Yeah. And it sounds like they're heading in that direction. There have been, it is pretty common in the blogosphere to say, we're going to do a 3-part series and get through 1 part.
Yeah.
never revisit.
No, I mean,
go ahead. We'll see.
I think what's promising is that there is an initiative. They acknowledge that there actually is a legitimate problem that needs to be addressed by an initiative. I think the hope is that initiative brings in a team that is going to sit there and look at what the company's doing holistically and in different places, and are working towards communicating that and getting feedback from users, the developers that are making tools or the developers that are making games, and in any of the assets, and are genuinely beginning to figuring out ways to address the issues that are being fielded by them. So
yeah,
here's hoping. All right, well, I think that's it for today. If you enjoyed this, our one viewer for right now during the live stream, if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe. Hopefully you did. Give us feedback. And if you want to catch more of this, we're on every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, where we usually cover about 3 news topics that have something important to do with the industry. So hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. See you soon.
Good evening.